Tim Stout. I'm here with Scott Tigchelaar today. He is the mayor-elect for Senoia. He had asked him to sit down with me so I could ask him a few questions that you guys have wanted me to ask, and he agreed. And we're excited to have you. And I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, sure.
I know you're even getting super busier now.
It's all right.
Who is Scott Tigchelaar?
Well, I came down here in the early 90s with the movie studio that's located just outside of town, Riverwood Studios. Worked there for 5 years and then came back in 2003 with my family, and I've been here since. Initially to just run the studio in 2003 and got a tax incentive passed here in Georgia for the film industry. A lot of folks know Walking Dead ultimately was based at that studio. That's one of probably 25 different film and TV projects that have been shot there, but certainly the most famous. Ultimately sold the studio to AMC Network, who produced The Walking Dead in 2017, got out of that business. And on a parallel path, while we were passing an incentive, we had an opportunity to buy some vacant land in the downtown here to stop a dollar store from coming to downtown, and started something called the Historic Senoia Project. And we started filling in some of the gaps, the vacant gaps on Main Street with not dollar stores. That was our commitment to the 5 families who own most of the property here in the downtown. So while you might technically say I'm a developer, it's not really the case. I'm not a typical developer. It's really just been a labor of love here fixing up the downtown. We had 5 businesses back in 2006, and now there's over 100. We just want to curate the revitalization of this town and protect the quality of life here. So I have no land outside of town. I have no aspirations to own land outside of town or develop anything else. I get lots of requests from other towns to come and do there what we did here. I just have no desire to do that. I'm 55 now, so over the next 10 years, I just want to finish the Historic Senoia Project, create the perfect setting for a lot of folks to live here, including my family. I live here. So we just want to protect the quality of life around here because I think it's a special place. And so that's my goal.
I agree with you. It is a special place, and I'm a mile from here, so I'm right up close. I think one thing that helped you with your election was your want to keep the downtown the way it is now. Growth has to happen, but it wasn't like it was all this big growth. We wanted it controlled, and you don't want it to grow just to be the sake of growing. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Sort of.
I think most people who have some sense about reality here would say that you can't stop growth, you can only shape the quality of it. So the growth that was coming when we got started on this project was a dollar store in the downtown. That's a different kind of growth than what we've pursued. We want quality growth. We want to manage that carefully. We've been at this for 20 years, so it's not something that we're trying to do overnight or too fast. We're just carefully sort of curating additions to the downtown. That, I think, can be extrapolated out around the whole town as well. So over the years, I've worked with volunteers in the city on different committees. I've been on our Downtown Development Authority, who puts on all the events in town, for 20 years. I just retired earlier this spring. But looking at the areas around us, around the downtown, making sure that that grows with quality as well, and not just haphazardly. So it starts to get a little frustrating for me when nobody's putting the right controls in place, and you get things like 658 units being proposed on 140 acres. There's no thought going into that about whether that's in keeping with the character of what Senoia is. Or when you look at people proposing hundreds of apartments in any kind of a development, that's not in keeping with the character of what Senoia is. Now, you look out at 16 and 85 where the new Publix is and the Tractor Supply is coming and Chick-fil-A. That's sort of your modern commercial development, and that's going to just, that land is owned by a bunch of different people. That's just going to fill in with that modern commercial development that you see all over the place. But we've taken steps over the years to protect the corridor from the Chick-fil-A up to Couch's Hill, that corridor on 16, to put a higher architectural standard on that. Even though it's not technically part of the downtown, you want a different sense of arrival than just all the modern commercial that's coming. You want a different sense of arrival there. You want something that says that you've arrived at a place that's historic. It's sort of a gateway to the historic downtown. So with the downtown, you want to finish it out in keeping with the architectural style that's there and the architectural vernacular and the time period of the town. So anything we add, we want it to look like it was built 100 years ago. Yeah. Then you've got a transition area on that corridor on 16, and then you've got sort of your modern commercial beyond that. And that ship had already sailed. Publix is already there, Tractor Supply is already approved. To the west of us, there's already the hardware store and other things that are sort of your modern commercial. Those are the die sort of cast out there, but we still have the opportunity to protect that corridor of 16 and finish the downtown in a way that's consistent with what was here to protect Senoia's historic sense of place.
Okay. As you spoke on earlier, as a community, we know that growth is inevitable. Mm-hmm. How can we grow responsible with the infrastructure, like as far as the roads, the water, and all of that? Because the roads, a certain time of the day, it gets backed up, gets busy, bringing in more houses, more growth is going to increase that. What's the plan to control that with the infrastructure?
So one big initiative for me has been protecting that area of 16 that ultimately has been talked about for 30 years about going to 4 lanes. There was a time years ago where DOT had in their long-range plan a bypass around Senoia. It was going to start in Zatella, out in Spalding County, and bear southwest, pick up Gordon Road, and then cut through to I-85 via Gordon Road. And that was going to be a 4-lane bypass of Senoia, and somehow that got removed from their long-range plan. We need to do something to get back on their long-range plan with some form of a bypass around Senoia, because I think it would be a travesty to allow 16 out here in front of the downtown to be turned into 4 lanes. So at the very least, we'd like to see 2 lanes be a diverted path around Senoia, whether that goes down that original route from Zatella to Gordon Road and the Newnan Coweta Airport, or whether it just becomes a truck bypass from Frazier's out on the west side where the new roundabout is, and cut across Old 85 or something like that. But getting back in front of DOT and getting the discussion back online to talk about that long-range plan and what does this area look like in 20 or 30 years, and start planning towards that. That's a big one on the traffic side. I think too, on some of the large developments that are around us, okay, so not necessarily in the city limits. Senoia's city limits are fairly small right now, but there's some huge tracts of land that are outside the city limits that are owned by developers. And so they have the right to either develop those in the county or possibly develop those in the city. And I think you've got to get as much engagement in that process as you can to manage that discussion and work with those guys to ensure that if it's appropriate for them to be in the city, that they get into the city and get annexed. But more importantly, that the quality of those developments, because they're so big potentially, that they take care of traffic concerns, that they make that some accommodations being made for schools. And while the school board may not think that we need a new school right now, by the time they do, we better have land set aside for them. And the opportunity to do that is in a large development discussion that wants to get annexed into the city. You can say, as a condition of that, you're going to set aside 50 acres for schools. I've talked to our school board representative, Amy Dees. She's awesome, really cares about this area. And she said that nobody ever really plans ahead with them like the way we're talking about doing. And so she very much appreciates that if there's a large tract of land that's possibly going to be annexed into the city, that the discussion is going to head in the direction of setting aside property for the school board to take care of a new elementary and a middle school. And ultimately, somewhere in this county, I mean, right now they've been redistricting the high schools in order to balance their populations, but ultimately there's going to need to be a high school. And so planning ahead for that and not being reactive to it. I've seen other places where they lose sight of that, and by the time they decide that it's time to build a new school, there's no land available, or the land that is available is too expensive, and so it becomes cost prohibitive, an additional burden on the taxpayers. It's all challenges that could be avoided with just proper planning. With respect to infrastructure, we're a small city, okay? We got 6,000 people, and we have a water and sewer system that's sized appropriately for that. Usually when a big development wants to come into the city, we do have a new sewage treatment plant. They need to pay down part of the debt on that so that the burden is removed from the taxpayers that are here. So I think the sewer side has got the capacity and it's got the growth potential. The water side's a little bit more of a concern because we seem to be having water challenges here in the city. A lot of people aren't happy with the quality. They're not happy with the pressure. There's issues with flow. We just saw what happened in Morningside. They didn't have flow on multiple fire hydrants, which allowed a house to burn to the ground instead of being fought properly. Like to work with our Public Works Department to assess what we have and what we need to do to what we have to get to the next level or accommodate that growth that's coming. I mean, you can't stop it. We just gotta be prepared for it, and obviously control the quality of it. But make sure that if somebody's going to be annexed in and tap into city water, that we have the capacity to do that. And if we don't, we've got to have accommodation elsewhere, whether it's bringing it in from the county, who wants to supply water to us, may want to take over our water system. I mean, there's all kinds of options. They all need to be explored and they need to be pursued proactively. You can't just wait for a 1,000-acre development to start, put that stress on the system, and then try to deal with it after the fact. That's like closing the gate when the horse is gone. So we don't want to do that. There's a lot of cities in the Southeast now that are, and probably around the country, but I know of companies in the Southeast that are taking over municipal water and sewer systems because they can bring a much higher level of expertise to the table than a town our size could typically afford. So those things need to be explored in a responsible way so that we're prepared for what's coming, because what's coming is coming.
It's going to happen.
So we got to make sure that we're rising to the challenge and that the infrastructure is there and that the quality is there, because our water rates have doubled. And I don't think our service level has doubled.
Yeah.
I think service level's actually gone down when you see certain neighborhoods with no flow at their hydrants and other neighborhoods with brown water. We used to flush our lines regularly. I think we need to get back to doing that. Maybe people have to put just a little point of entry filter on, because one of the challenges that was caused by flushing the lines, it stirred up sediment in the lines, and it would clog your fridge filter and other things. Getting ahead of that kind of thing and making sure that our lines are getting flushed again, but if necessary, if it's causing problems, work with the public to get filters on at their point of entry.
Great. Next question is one where me and you started talking quite a bit, is the 141 South project. This was one you've clearly been verbal on this one. So give us a 15-second definition of what the 141 South project is and your feelings and plan with that.
So it's a parcel of land on the south side of 16, right across from the Merrimack Lake and the library, Senoia Library. Part of it is in the city, half of it's outside the city, so there's been an effort by the developer to annex the part that's in the county into the city. And part of what they were proposing, in addition to that annexation, was a rezoning to allow for 658 homes, of which 300 were apartments. I think that got way down the wrong path. And you feel for the developer a little bit, because they were being told by the city that this is what we wanted. I don't think that is what the city wants. I think the public needs to be involved and engaged in that discussion earlier than to have it happen for 2 years behind closed doors or without the public input, to the point where it got to where it was up for final approval for rezoning and that density.
The public showed up.
And then the public showed up, and you were there, and I was there, and they were upset. So better communication, better transparency from day one, and better guidance for the developer. In fairness to them, you don't want to spin their wheels for a couple of years in the wrong direction. You want them more engaged in delivering higher quality that's more consistent with what Senoia is.
Golf cart paths. Heard a lot of people talking about connecting to Peachtree City, connecting everywhere. What plan, or is there a plan?
Part of that LCI study that was funded by a grant from ARC was to look at critical paths of connectivity, not only within the city of Senoia, but to outlying larger subdivisions that might be the town, or to neighbors like Peachtree City. For a long time, people were saying it's not worth the money to connect to Peachtree City, because they were looking at the path going down Rockaway Road, and there was a mile of it required plus a bridge over Line Creek, and it looked cost prohibitive. If you look at it from a different angle, we're only 750 feet apart through the north end of Heritage Point. Peachtree City, money set aside in their 2017 SPLOST to connect to Senoia and meet us halfway. I think good value for the taxpayer in having another city pay for half that connection, and Senoia being highly for a grant from ARC, a connectivity grant or a DOT grant, to pay for 80% of our half. So for 20% of half of the cost of that project, the city of Senoia could get a connection to Peachtree City that's much more cost reasonable than going down Rockaway Road. And some people say, well, how does that help me? Well, if you don't like the traffic on Rockaway Road, every person who can take an e-bike or get in a golf cart and go to Peachtree City on an alternative means of travel is one less car that's going to get on that road. And if you've spent any time on Rockaway Road at 5 o'clock coming into town, it's like a Rockaway rush. Sometimes it's backed up to Lake Hutchinson. That's only going to get unless you start providing means for alleviating that. So that's one project. I think we need to pursue that. Again, that needs to be socialized with the citizens. But just through this campaign, a lot of people were enthusiastic about that, including people in Heritage Point. Yeah. I mean, Peachtree City's got golf cart paths. That's a pretty special to have right next door.
Reaching distance.
Yes, a lot. And with lithium batteries now, you can go 50, 60 miles on a charge. You're only 5 miles to the new Trader Joe's at the Avenue. I would rather take a golf cart to go there if I was going to go there than to get on Rockaway Road and 74 and then fight my way through that 54-74 intersection, which, while it's getting redone, is only going to continue to get worse. Okay, so the fact that the city is willing to meet us halfway with the money, that's amazing. That's good value for the taxpayers' dollars, and I think that there's good connectivity, traffic alleviating means. There's a lot of people who live in Senoia that work in Peachtree City at the companies like Panasonic or Hoshizaki or whatever. If they could take a golf cart to work, that's probably one less car their family needs. Those are big considerations for the connectivity. Yeah. Now you look at a big project that's outside the city right now, a big tract of land like Scarborough owns to our west. Those are got some tracts of land. Connectivity from those projects, whether they're developed in the county or in the city, is important to Senoia because, again, there's 1,000 homes out there on that 1,000 acres, and you can provide them a means to get into town on an e-bike or walk or on a golf cart.
Shop here, eat
to shop here and eat here without having to get in a car and take up another parking space downtown. You can get 4 golf carts in a parking space. And we need, as the golf cart demand grows, start redefining some of the spaces in the downtown to accommodate golf carts better. Because right now, if you just get a couple of your friends and you're all on golf carts, you can all slip into one parking space on Main Street if you coordinate that, but you don't want to block a complete stranger in. So there's an lot more people and have a bigger consumer and less traffic getting on the road. It's just nicer. I mean, if I'd ride Publix in a golf cart with the new path that goes into Publix today, I'd rather do that than get in a car and get on 16 and go up and fight my way around to get into the Publix that way. It's just so much nicer. So making sure that those are priorities that are negotiated on the front end of a bigger development that might want to annex into the city, that has to be on the front end. You can't do it after the fact.
Yeah. As a developer, you just talk about you're not really your average developer, but several concerns about you being a developer and being the mayor. How can the residents of Senoia feel safe with you putting Senoia's needs first over your own?
Yep. Well, I live here, so as a citizen, I share the same needs as the fellow citizens here and concerns. As a developer, like you said, and we talked about earlier, I'm not a typical developer. I'm a one project, one town, one downtown focused labor of love. And even that, I talked about through my campaign, we've sold projects and parcels off to stakeholders who were like-minded, who wanted to be stakeholders in town, like Bistro Hillary. We sold them their building because that personally invests them in the town for life. Yeah. And you want to do that. So it's about curating the downtown in an appropriate way, both historically, architecturally, and just the aesthetics of the downtown, more than any kind of a typical developer. A typical developer wants to get in, build something, flip out of it in 3 to 5 years and make as much money as possible. This is, anybody who's ever looked at investing in the downtown here, I've qualified their interest in any discussion with them by saying, you have to be a legacy investor if you want to play here. And if I'm going to sell you anything here that you want of mine, you got to be a legacy-minded investor. That means you're here for life, and you're looking at this not in a 3 to 5 year flip time frame, but in you're going to own this and hand it down to your children. I think that's more appropriate for the vibe of Senoia. Like I said, I don't have any land outside of the downtown, and what I have in the downtown is getting smaller because we're either filling it in and selling it to somebody, or we're just holding it onto it ourselves for my own personal and my business partner's retirement. I have no aspirations to build anything outside of town, have no aspirations to buy any land outside of town. So that's unusual in terms of a developer, a typical developer. So what I want to do is protect what we have here, just like everybody else wants to protect what we have here. So looking at the typical developers and what they want to do and the land that they have and whether they want to annex in and making sure that it's appropriate for Senoia, I want to make sure that all gets done in the same way we've focused on the downtown. If there's ever, and we talked about this in my campaign, if there's ever a potential conflict where some developer who wants to do something in town happens to own property next to mine or something like that, anything where there's a potential conflict of interest, I have to recuse myself. I don't see that really happening much at all because I don't own any land adjacent to anybody else. I don't want to acquire any land outside town. I've had opportunities galore over the years. There's a lot of land that's changed hands over the years. These big tracts of land that are in the hands of bigger developers around Senoia, they haven't owned them for 50 years. They've just acquired them in the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah. And I've had every opportunity in the world to go buy that land and get into that big business. I don't want to do that. I'd like to make sure that they do it at a high level of quality, but I don't have aspirations to do that at all. So this whole conflict of interest smokescreen that came up is just sort of the political smokescreen during the campaign. It was just to present some kind of specter of impropriety. The system doesn't allow for that anymore, Tim. If the person that's going to hold me to the highest standard is, as mayor, if there's a potential conflict of interest, is the public or the person that may be disadvantaged by my advantage, right? So if I own a piece of property that's being voted on, number one, I have to recuse myself. If I somehow didn't recuse myself, the person who's being disadvantaged by that is going to speak up and say, I'm sorry, you have a conflict of interest. You have to recuse yourself. You're right. There's so much scrutiny. Everything I own is public record. Mm-hmm. And when I ran for mayor, I had to qualify by identifying every single property I own or have a minority interest in, or my wife has an interest in, everything. So there's your baseline. If all of a sudden 2 years from now, I ended up with 5 more properties that were part of some big developer's development, that's a huge ethics violation. It's a cause for an ethics investigation, and there might be criminal charges associated with that. There's so much scrutiny that I didn't have before being mayor that I now have, and the system calls for accountability where the public can say you have a conflict of interest if I don't say it myself. So
you're going to be under the microscope.
The microscope.
More now than ever.
Ever.
I like that answer. Thank you. 2 more questions. Another thing that kept coming up is the Senoia manager's salary. What's your feelings on that?
Well,
I don't know the guy.
He's a nice guy. We're here in the South. I think everybody's a nice guy in general. But our budget we've been going through the 2026 proposed budget process for the last 6 months here in town to get the 2026 budget approved. What was initially presented at the first budget workshop was terrible. Our budget is not in a form that is at the professional level of the size of the city that we're at.
6,000 people?
6,000 people. We have a $16+ million revenue, so $16+ million of expenses as well. So that's the size of our budget, and our population's, like you said, just over 6,000 people. If you look at other towns around us and their budgets, they're much more understandable. They're presented in a way that shows past years' budget versus actual, so that you can see spending trends. And I think that we've had trouble, because of the way our budget's been presented in past years, we've had trouble for council's sake in seeing what those spending trends are and where they're getting out of whack. And salary is one of them. So I like to say there's some areas that need to be brought into alignment. There's so much more transparency and clarity with other cities. With AI, you can do a comparison of cities the same population, roughly the same budget, same metro Atlanta area, and in minutes have a full report of what their budgets are, what percentage of their budget salaries are for police, for whatever, for staff, and you can see where things are out of alignment. We can't see that in our own, within the four corners of our own budget. And I know that there's been some city council members who've been asking for more clarity on that for the past number of years, and it hasn't been forthcoming. So that has to be brought into alignment. It has to be clearer. It has to be more transparent for the public so that you as a taxpayer and me as a taxpayer know where our tax dollars are getting spent and whether or not it's appropriate. And if you don't have the ability to see past spending trends or variances in spending over 5%, if something's higher, more than 5% than it was last year, you need that called out in the budget so that you can analyze what's going on there. Why is that going up so quickly? Why is it going down so quickly? Did we spend it last year? Why are we asking for it again in the budget this year if we didn't spend it last year? If you don't see past year's performance, you can't analyze from an executive level, which is the mayor and council, you can't analyze whether it's appropriate to keep spending it. So getting that to a professional level and drilling down into the details of what's being spent where so that there's better transparency for the public is a huge priority for me. So that's day one. We're going to get an appropriate person in to reanalyze and represent the city's budget in a way that's more transparent to the public.
I love it. Last question. What's something you wish I would have asked or something that you want to let the people in Senoia know?
It's a good question. A lot of your questions have been great, and I think they've touched
Easy
on.
questions.
Sorry?
They're not been easy questions.
No,
so you did really
but I think
good.
they've touched on some of the areas of, or most of the areas that have come through this election process as areas of concern of the public. Infrastructure, managing growth, a city's budget, my personal potential conflict of interest, and the misinformation around that. I think you've touched on all the major areas. I think personally, for anybody who knows me and has seen me be part of the redevelopment of this town over the last 20 years, understands that I care more about this town than I do necessarily about my own personal bottom line. I loan equipment to the city to put the Christmas tree up. I loan equipment to the city to do things that they don't have the equipment to do. I'm out there picking up trash. I volunteer and have for 20 years. We've had the best group of volunteers in this town. If you want to get involved in the community that's here, volunteer to help put on these events because we're always looking for more volunteers. And how amazing is it? I don't know if you and your wife came to the Journey tribute band.
Traveling.
Oh my gosh. What a great event out at Mayor-Elect Lake. Putting on things like that, our Alive After 5 event in the downtown, managing that well, the Christmas parade that's coming up, the tour of homes that's coming up, more music events, Porch Fest. Yeah. They've been doing that for a couple of years now, and that's
a good time.
That's the best time ever. 22 bands on 22 porches. That's part of what makes living here so special. Not just what's going on, but the people that are helping to put it on. And I've been part of that. I'm not taking credit for all of it. There is a team of people that are amazing and tireless in creating that what's special about the community that's here. So getting involved in that, and I think if you know me, you know that I've been involved in that for 20 years, that I've been involved in caring about the quality of what gets put on Main Street in new construction. It costs a lot more money to build what we've built in town than what a typical developer would put out there for the sake of this town. Yeah. And when you do the analysis of that, when you look at how much more it costs to build that level of quality versus what the rents are in town, it almost doesn't pencil. So most developers over the years, most people that I've talked to, who have said, hey, we're interested in doing something in Senoia. Oh, you could do this right here. Oh, well, the economics of that aren't as attractive as a project I could go do somewhere else. I can go somewhere else. But you've got to be legacy minded. It can't be about the bottom line only. It's got to be about the quality of what you're doing and having that as part of your commitment to the town forever. So it's finding like-minded people to play in the sandbox here, to be part of this community, to volunteer and help curate some of the most amazing events that we have in town. If you know me, you know that I've been doing that for 20 years here. And I hope, and it feels like the voters responded to that commitment.
Awesome. I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you for the questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hey guys, this is Tim Stout.